Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted, the live call-in show where we want to hear what you believe and why. Our lines are open right now if you want to give us a call at 512-991-9242, or if you want to go through your computer, you can go through tiny.cc/call-TW. Each week on Truth Wanted, we have a special guest, and this week is an exciting one for me because I get to have one of my favorite activists on, and this week we have on Prophet of Zod. Hi, Zod. How are you doing?
Hi.
I'm really
Thanks for having
excited
me
that
on.
you're here. I'm really excited that you're here with me this week. What your videos were really important to me when I was going through my deconstruction. I think that you have a way about kind of processing your wording and really getting the feel for the whole experience of what it's like to lose your faith. And you're just super sarcastic and funny, and I love it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, like, what have you been working on lately? Do you have anything coming up here? I know I've watched your more recent videos, and I think one of the last ones was talking about. Oh shoot, what was your last one about? Your pastor, or is that the one that's coming up?
That's the one that's coming up.
Right.
Yeah, last one I did was about the arguments trying to explain what happens to people who have never heard about Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
Using Mike Winger as an illustration. Yeah.
Right. Mike Winger. That was a good one too. I like that one.
Yeah, that one was a little personal for me because that's one of the first doubts I had, which I said in the video. That's the first thing that just popped in my mind when I was a kid. And I think a lot of people try to sort through that, and it gets to the bottom of a lot of insecurities we have about what salvation means and what it is for people who haven't heard and stuff like that.
Yeah, and like I think you brought through like the points about like if you follow these things to their conclusions, like it kind of puts people in a tough spot because it's like, do you continue to evangelize, or like is it better not to evangelize? I think if you haven't seen the video, you have to go watch it. It's really good. And then
yeah, it does create a bit of a pinch because one thing I tried to harp on is not only is it a sort of fact from Christian doctrine, but it's something that's extremely important to Christians. If you speak to them in any other conversation other than trying to make an excuse for unevangelized people, they'll nail down that this exact thing needs to happen in order for you to be saved, and you need to practice in a way that looks like this. Without that, they lose their identity and religion becomes more pluralistic, and they have absolutely no use for that until suddenly you ask what happens to unevangelized people, and they try to backpedal in the most vague way possible so they don't commit to anything.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting phenomena.
Yeah, I think it's a question that needs to be asked more often. It's definitely one that came up for me too, because like, when you're like you had mentioned, like it came up for you when you were younger too, and I think that was the same for me. Like some of the things that came up even when I was like quite young, like what about all the people in the other, other countries or whatever that haven't heard about it? What about them? So, and then you have a couple other things coming up here too that you're working on, right?
Yeah. Right now I'm doing another response to an old pastor that I used to attend church at, and I used to work for him as well. Unfortunately, that was quite an experience, but I've done a few responses to him over the years. I haven't used his name or the name of the church or anything, just because I don't want to go down that avenue in my life. But yeah, I'm doing
understandable.
Yeah, he has a big church in our community, and my children are almost inevitably going to run into people who go there and stuff like that. And so I've run into people who recognized him either currently or previously going to that church.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be out there, but I'm not in a hurry to have a lot of people trying to make contact with him from the atheist YouTube community or anything like that. But yeah, I came upon a video that got a visceral reaction out of me, which is pretty rare. I usually find apologetics materials pretty interesting, and I have a lot of patience for it because I see it as a puzzle. But this is one of the few ones that actually had me almost shaking because I was angry at what he was saying.
Yeah, that's kind of hard to picture. Like, you seem pretty cool as a cucumber in most everything that I've seen you do. Plus, you normally show your face in your other videos, so I can't imagine. So what was it, without ruining your video? What were some of the things that got you really upset?
Well, in short, the video was telling everybody who to vote for in the presidential election that was going to be coming up in the next couple days. And he did that as literally as possible without using candidates' names.
Mm-hmm.
He said that one party is literally aligned with Satan and is evil, and of course applauds the death of infants, which we all know what that route sounds like.
Yeah.
And just a lot of really ugly things about anybody who is not a Christian or who doesn't believe what he does. And it was a weird combination of saying just very vile things about anybody who's not a believer. He actually harkened back to the good old days when people like us couldn't hold public office because you had to be a member of a Christian church, and he thought that was a good thing. And I don't know. I can't even. It's hard to go through the list. But then from there, he drifted into, of course, Fox News / One America News, Newsmax talking points about everything from rioters and COVID precautions, which were, I guess, two of the main ills in our country, and the devil's literally laughing at us because of it. So I don't know. It was just a buildup of a lot of things. And I guess the core issue is he really viewed everything not in terms of clashes between people who are honestly trying to live together in a society and come up with differences of opinions.
Right.
He literally said that we're really we don't have political issues in our society. We have good versus evil issues.
Yeah.
And there are basically good people up against evil people. And the way he did that and the mentality he drilled into his his congregation, which I'm on the receiving end of that often on social media. It's pretty upsetting. I don't like when people talk about other people like that.
Yeah, so. It makes it almost impossible to have a conversation if someone is not just seeing you as somebody that's disagreeing with you. They think that you're actually evil, or that you've been deceived, or that kind of rhetoric. And I've been thinking a lot about that, and I chatted a little bit too. There's got to be some sort of a method that a lot of these leaders and these pastors will use to kind of infiltrate and manipulate the way people are looking at the situation. And it gives them really no out to disagree, because they've kind of started off with their idea first that there's this good versus evil thing, and it trickles down into all these the political issues and everything else. And that I have seen too personally, that they will make it an issue that even kind of your salvation can depend on it if you disagree. So there's there's no room to have a conversation there, whether it's internally with the other believers or with people who don't believe or are on the other side completely. It's really causing a rift, so that there's no open lines for communication, because there's a fear mongering that there's an evil side and a good side, and there's just no nuance there. And that's really frustrating for me to see too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
One thing I really hated was, like you said, he didn't give people an out. And that's one thing, I think it's pretty common, but he very much anticipated that people were going to be disagreeing with what he said, that it might not sit well even with everybody in the congregation. And so he told them, he said, if you leave the church over this, that's an issue of integrity. I think you should come talk to me about it, which if you watch my video, you're going to see what kind of conversation you'd probably anticipate having if you went and spoke to him about it.
Yeah.
And so basically, I think he made people feel trapped in there. And that actually had been my experience in that church for a period of time, until I ended up leaving still as a believer at that point.
Yeah. I think some of the rhetoric might be something if you're feeling uncomfortable by what I'm saying, it's you need to get right with your heart with Jesus, And like just giving it that spin gives no opportunity for you to be like, I think I just disagree with this person, because they will tell you how you're supposed to feel about this information that you don't maybe agree with right off the bat. And that's what I mean when you don't get an out, because they've already told you how to feel about what they're going to tell you, and then they tell it to you. And then if you feel anything other than full agreement, you're already kind of set up to feel guilty about it. And I think that's obviously, it's a very trapped feeling, and I think it can be a dangerous thing too when one person holds that much authority over an entire group. Because I mean, we see it happening now too, that like if you have a group of people who think that they have the truth, and they built this relationship where somebody that is in charge of them has this authority over them, when it comes to things like we've seen it happen with like the vaccine, if somebody who's already has that leadership kind of position over them, they're going to have to feel almost obligated to agree with them over things that really have nothing to do with their faith. I mean, they shouldn't anyway, in my opinion. So I see it as like kind of like a line to not having much of a reality check, or like a confirmation bias kind of check, because you're already kind of, everybody's kind of signed on to agree with somebody over this issue. And when we like really like take a step back, it's just another human being. It's a human being leading a bunch of other human beings. So, but there's this other kind of world in it that they think they have like this divine authority to speak on, like not only the Bible or like their community, but bigger issues and world issues. It's hard to think about like how to even break through that when you know somebody has that presupposition going into a conversation. That's the hard part, I think, for us coming from this side, where you just want to have good conversation, but we know that they have this idea that there's evil, and if you don't agree with them, that you're maybe evil. You're not just not agreeing with them. I don't know.
Yeah, I found that to be a huge impediment to conversation, because I still know a lot of these people on Facebook, and so I'll try to just make a little benign comment, not even really challenging their assertion, but just saying, hey, maybe you can back down and understand that people have good reasons for believing something other than you do. And it immediately becomes very hot. And it's really bizarre the reactions seem very bizarre until you realize that this is the mentality they're coming at you from. And seeing this sermon really shows me that people like him are in the ears of a lot of people, really reinforcing this over the pulpit. And yeah, it is a very trapped feeling. That's one of the things I find most upsetting. Is it's annoying for us and maybe can create some personal problems for us that can be distressing. But I really feel bad for the people who are actually sitting in the pews who have various forms of doubt, and they just don't know where to go with them. And this kind of rhetoric makes them feel like they don't know who to turn to and who to speak to. And I'm pretty sure churches are full of a lot of people who are internalizing a lot of things that they don't want to turn and say to the next person. And the pastors, when they say things like this, they're dividing and conquering their own congregation, if nothing else. And they're using examples of non-believers or the wrong types of people, not only to trash outsiders in the eyes of the church, but I think it serves as an example of how we're going to view you if you start to question any doubts. And that's where I have probably my biggest problem, is it makes people feel like they can't even speak up. And I think that can be a lonely feeling. And like you said, a very trapped feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that's like a lot of people I hear from, like they started feeling that uncomfortable feeling about how their pastors talked about non-believers, because they were actually also maybe struggling with some of their own questions and doubts. And they didn't really have like, it's scary. It's even more scary to come out in your community that you don't believe, or even that you're doubting, because you know that they're already going to see you that way. Like there's a filter on it, and it can make it for really, really hard for people.
Yeah, and the sermon we saw, it didn't even give room. You could still be a believer.
Yeah.
You couldn't even voice within that congregation. The read I'm getting from the sermon he was presenting, you couldn't even within that congregation still say you believed, still say you took this Christian stance on these issues, but you're considering voting for Biden. you couldn't
Yeah.
even say that within that environment, because that would instantly be construed as not just wrong, but like evil, and you're taking up the side of darkness.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the rhetoric they use too. Like, we're not joking. I don't know if anybody has not been to church lately. We're not joking about, like, they will say, like, this is from the devil. This is like these people who are intentionally going out and talking about this, or you know, publicly disagreeing with us, and like and then they will say these people are motivated by the devil. They are demonic. And it's like, I grew up hearing that stuff, and it felt really like that was a normal way of talking. It honestly was a normal way of talking. But when you kind of are on, when you've taken a step away from that, and you like check in on what they're actually teaching on Sunday mornings, like it sounds bizarre, like you said, Zod. It's so bizarre. But I think we do have a couple of calls on the line, actually, maybe even talking about what we're talking about this here. But like, I'm just going to take a moment here just to thank our patrons, and we're going to take a look at who our patron of the week is. If you like what we do here on Truth Wanted, you can support us through Patreon. And every single week, we like to take a little time to shout out a patron of the week. And this week's patron is Paul Schneider. So thank you so much, Paul, for your support of the show, and everybody else on patreon.com/Truth Wanted. If you're interested in helping us that way, that'd be awesome. And I think we're going to jump into some calls now. So first up here, we have another Jeremiah from Texas. Jeremiah wants to talk about the evangelical religious community getting more involved in the political scene. I think that's kind of what we were talking about.
Very much so, yes.
Jeremiah, can you hear us?
Yeah, hi.
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 What do you want to talk about today?
That you pretty much hit the nail on the head with that description. I've just noticed a lot. I watch a lot of like progressive YouTube politics channels, and they've been talking a lot. Everything's always about how it affects the evangelical groups, and it's just, I hear a lot about it, and it just kind of seems like it's getting worse. I'm not sure if that's just my perspective of it, or if others see it that way, or, kind of curious how you guys thought on it.
I'll make a quick comment on that. Like, as far as, so I'm in Canada, and growing up, I don't remember really any talk too much about politics, like coming from like the church community. And in the last few years, even in Canada, it's becoming such a big issue, and it's being talked about, our own politics and also American politics. And I in my opinion, I kind of see it as it's part of like a bigger, I don't want to say conspiracy, but sometimes it does come across as like a bit of a conspiracy theory that like there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and a lot of people are feeling out of control. And I think under like a certain narrative, especially like the evangelical narrative of like what we were talking about earlier, like good versus evil, I think that's the lens that they're looking through things at. And so it's easy to have that, like everything fall under that same thing. So if things are going like not well politically, I think it's easy for people to think that they have some sort of like role in it to like help overcome like this evil forces in the world. And I would say that it's definitely becoming more of a thing, because it's happening all over the place, not just in America, but it seems to be the worst right now in the States. I don't know. I'm not American, and I try to keep up with American politics, but I can't speak to it maybe as much as my friends who are actually living in it. I don't know. What do you think, Zod?
As far as if it's worse, it's a hard thing for me to say, because I see things from two different perspectives. Having been in it, I probably don't have the same sense of the scope as before. Because when I was younger, they were very heavily involved in politics, and they urged Christians to vote, of course, against issues like abortion or things like that. Gay marriage and stuff like that. So I can't really tell if it's getting worse. It feels like it is, but a couple things that I guess I would observe are the character of what the evangelical community is accepting and celebrating is changing quite a bit. And so I think, in my opinion, I think that we would have found Trump totally horrifying and repulsive in the church environment I grew up with, at least when I was a child. And for some reason, it feels like something has changed to where they find that acceptable. And then the other thing is just the language feels to have gotten a lot meaner as far as calling people various names, considering them oversensitive or whatever. I feel like that's intensified a lot to where it feels like a change in the character of the evangelical community. And I don't know how much of that's real and how much is my perception. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that provides you any clarity.
I think it does help. I mean, I do like to try and do things that can help if I can volunteer or donate when I have any money, which isn't very often. You know, but is there anything you might think that would maybe help build on, you know, the atheist or the secular side trying to get the message out there more? Or I don't see that there's much I can do.
I think there's definitely things we can all do. Like, we won't all do the same things to the same extent. And for any of us, it feels overwhelming. Like, even if you have a reasonably sized platform, I think the extent of the problem and your ability to move everything, it feels like you're trying to plug up all the holes in the dam. And it gets overwhelming, but I think all of us can make a difference, even if it's just in our normal everyday conversations. I don't know. It's going to feel like you're probably losing more battles than you're winning, but I don't know what to do more than just be a reasonable person. Try to help people see little. When I'm engaging with people I grew up with, or just Christians and conservatives in general, I try to find something that they can observe in the conversation and identify with, and some point that I can help them see without giving up a lot of their identity and a lot of their perspective, and that they can shift a little bit without a huge amount of buy-in, or without losing face or losing part of their identity as whatever they are. Give them something that they can gravitate toward. And then aside from that, just be there openly identifying as who you are to whatever extent it is safe and healthy for you. And then just show people that you're a decent person. Like, a lot of times not arguing and just being decent, but letting people know who you are, that makes a big difference too. But it's all little tiny moves in the right direction, and sometimes swimming upstream, and sometimes we might not win the battle, and all we can do is just make things less bad until the tide turns. I don't know if that helps at all.
I was thinking the same kind of thing. Like, I don't know what more we can really do other than try to help, like, de-escalate. I feel like you're like what you were saying, like the even the rhetoric has gotten so intense lately. Like, maybe all we can do on a practical level is just continue to, like, try to be charitable when we're listening to people, and not show the same kind of thing that they're doing. Maybe don't use the same, like, inflammatory language if we can help it. I mean, some stuff is worth getting upset about, but I think just when they've been hearing that, you know, the other side is just, like, literally evil, I think showing them that you're, like, still a pretty decent human being and having, like, a reasonable conversation with them can cause them to actually, like, have a little bit of that dissonance in their head, which can, you know, later on down the road maybe cause them to rethink maybe why they have been accepting that for so long, of that people are evil or that the other side's evil. Honestly, I think, like, there's so much of just the engaging on your own side, so you can hear people are evil and you can believe it, but if they actually have conversations with people from the other side, it's hard to hold on to that idea for much longer when you meet some really, really great people who don't agree with you. I don't know.
All right. Thanks so much for giving me your opinions. And I'm a big fan of yours, Zod.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
My whole YouTube atheist experience started with your channel. So Thanks.
Oh, wow.
No, that's awesome. Okay, well, thanks for calling in, Jeremiah. I second that Prophet of Zod is one of the best channels out there. I think that there's so many different people in the activist community, and everybody brings something different to the table. And I think it's always interesting to see like whose content really like stands out to different people, because I think people need different things at different stages of it. And I had mentioned to you, we were talking about it earlier, that like I think your content's really good for people who already are kind of aware of the fact that they're doubting, but they're having a really hard time like sorting out their thoughts on it, because I think you've spent a lot of time sitting down and really thinking through all the wording. And I know personally for me, like it was kind of in that muddy area of thinking about it. And then when I came on your videos, like I was a few months into it already, and I was like, yes, that's exactly what I've been trying to say. Like that's the wording. I couldn't think of it. And part of it is because I was still kind of thinking under my Christianese framework, and I hadn't even like maybe heard some of those thoughts before. So anyway, I'll just fangirl for a second there.
Well, thank you.
I would like to talk to Eric. Eric has just recently discovered Dante's Inferno and Peter's Apocalypse, and two pieces of work that actually have had a huge impact, I think, on evangelical thought. So we're going to talk to Eric. Hi, Eric.
Hello there. Yes, never heard of those two subjects ever in my life, and I am a Christian theist. Last time I said atheist by mistake, but a Christian theist. And the purpose of me calling is to get a atheist point of view before I ask a Christian minister or pastor. And my brother, he is a Muslim. Oh, I hope I said that right. So please forgive me, you guys. But I'm going to ask him as well. But I know from a Christian pastor, I most likely will get a very kind of like a sermon-y, churchy response. And I'm learning from Matt Dillahunty and I forget his name, Eric, from Talk Heathen, to be more critical-minded thinking. And so even though I'm a Christian, it's just like a lot of the questions that I am hearing that atheists have or have answered, I've had those for years. I've just thought I was a bad Christian. You know, sorry to sound so elementary, but I thought I was a bad Christian. But now that I'm 40 years old, I'm like, whoa, I'm not the only person that had these same questions, you know, and I'm questioning like what's going on here with the spirituality thing that's going on. So I would like to know, your guys, what is this Dante's Inferno and Peter of Apocalypse, whatever that is? And I don't necessarily need to be online to hear it, but I can stay if you want me to.
Oh, okay, awesome. I have some thoughts about it. I haven't actually read through the entire book of Dante's Inferno. I have read Peter's Apocalypse.
There's a book?
There's a whole book.
Oh,
Yeah, there's like I can't remember there's a whole book on it. It's I think there's more than one too by the same the author's escaping me right now, but I think it's a medieval writer, and so there was a whole series basically, and it's kind of like a fan fiction of, you know, the idea of eternal torment, and there's like a journey that this guy goes on. And I honestly think that looking at the history of hell and the idea of hell, a lot of what we have in right now in like Protestantism and like evangelical views of the afterlife, I think a lot of it does come from Dante's Inferno, and like a lot of the imagery that we have about like burning, like the idea of burning alive, and just perpetual physical torture. I think a lot of that actually does come from that, but as well, the Apocalypse of Peter, like there's a whole genre of writing from the early centuries after Christianity. Like there's many different apocalypses, because it just basically means like revelation. What? So it's just the writings of some guys. I mean, they were all guys as far as I know. It's just the writings of someone's vision.
You got to be kidding me.
What do you,
Okay, I'm sorry. I did not know it was a whole entire series, number one. And number two, I did try to watch a video, but I'm not going to lie, it was too scary for me to even watch. But the one thing that I did notice is that the women caught a lot of torture. And I'm just like, how they going to be sexist in hell? That doesn't make any sense. But anyway, so I am so sorry. I had no clue that this was a book series, which now makes me think, okay, well, that can't be too real if it's a whole book series. I'm sorry, continue on.
No, there's so much to discover
Crazy.
that's been like written outside of what is considered canon in the Bible right now. A lot of it you can find online for free. I think there's a website, early Christian writings something.com. Maybe if I find it, I'll put it in the comments later. But there's so many other writings that were written in the early centuries that didn't make it into the Bible. Even the revelation that we have now in the Bible, the book of Revelation, like that is one among many other kind of like visionary type books. Dante's Inferno was written many years ago, but you can actually start to see how the ideas developed, that the ideas of like eternal torment and like these are ideas that people have kind of expanded on throughout the years. And absolutely, like there's so much to read and so much to discover. Anyway, I love talking about that kind of stuff, non-canonical writings. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I have very few thoughts about it, except in big picture terms. I would say, first off, Eric, I was in very much a similar position as you're in, I think, from what you're saying, where for years I had a lot of doubts about, maybe I'm paraphrasing you wrong saying doubts, but I had a lot of questions or had a lot of issues and that aligned with the same things atheists brought up. And I still remained a practicing Christian and still believed. But I think I see something of where you're coming at, and I can appreciate where you're at there, because I spent a long time there myself. And I'm not trying to imply that you're on the same journey I am, or you're going to land where I am, and you won't be complete until that happens. But I think I can get some of the flavor of where you're coming from. With these writings, I've heard some about the Inferno. I know it just in broad strokes. Like, I believe it's about various forms of punishment, various levels of punishment that, like Erin said, started to shape some of what Christians understand about hell. And I think it flows somewhat or was inspired by Greek and Roman ideas of afterlife punishment. And I think in addition, there are actually different levels of heaven, from what I understand. I'm not totally clear about all of it. But yeah, I would just echo that it's shaped a lot of Christian thinking and was based on some previous concepts about the afterlife and the underworld. Beyond that, the big thing I would say is, one thing, it's hard to get your mind around. It takes some time to start to realize when you grow up you understand that there's basically an inspired word of God, right? That takes the shape of the Bible. Is that your picture of how things work?
I'm not too sure what you mean. I've heard that word before. But this is small background. I grew up Pentecostal, so it was the blood of Jesus. You do what the word says. If you don't, then you are you got to go. In our particular church, you had to go through a series of praying and fasting until you aligned with what the pastor was saying. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think you're speaking to a couple other former Pentecostals here too, so we're all in good company. I mean, not other former Pentecostals, but yeah. But I think one thing is, most Christians today, at least in the U.S., conservative evangelicals and most Protestants in general, think that the Bible is one body that's the inerrant word of God, and that's set apart from everything else. What's that?
I'm sorry. I think I was kind of understanding what you're saying now. Yes, my thought used to be that the Bible was perfect and there was no mistakes, and it came the voice of God spoke to these men of God, and they wrote it down. And then it went from that to learning that it's filled with mistakes, but we still believe and we just overlook those mistakes. So it was inspired. So inspired, that means, they kind of misheard here, and some scribe accidentally did this, and they took out stuff or through history, to block certain things, but it's still God's word. So that's where I'm at now.
I think
those mistakes
that's
still
pretty
God's
much
word.
that's a pretty common view amongst evangelicalism, that the Bible, like Zod was saying, like it's kind of one voice. It comes from like I know people who believe in inspiration as like what you had mentioned, like literally that God had whispered in their ears what to write down. But I think a more common one now is just that like I think the word that I was used a lot when I was in it was like it was impressed upon a person. I don't really know what that means now, but it is kind of a little bit mind-blowing when you start to learn that there was other writings that were circulating around the same time that the Bible was written, and that what we have now as like that's in the book, in the collection that we call the Holy Bible, that people think is the Word of God, that wasn't actually decided on right away. Like there was other writings that fell outside of that, and that were not put in what we what was preserved now. And it's really fascinating to go and read that. And I think the biggest thing that I got from doing that kind of like work online and looking into it was just seeing the progression of ideas, and seeing that the ones that got put in the Bible kind of all were in line with whatever the kind of, I don't know, the agenda was of the people at the time.
Yeah, one thing that took me some time to get my one thing to add real quick. One thing that took me some time to get my head around, even as a non-believer, this really had to sink in slowly as I absorbed new information and changed my perspective, is that the Bible is not set aside as something drastically different from all other writings at that time or even since. So even as a non-believer and even arguing with former Christians, I still had some sense that if Paul wrote something in an epistle and it was part of the Bible, that was somehow substantively different than something a preacher says over the pulpit today, or that somebody else wrote back then. And so one thing that really gives you a sense of perspective is there were all these other writings. There were tons of other gospels. There were tons of other apocalypses and letters and essays and things like that. And it was just a bunch of people writing their opinions. Almost think like people in comment boards on the internet today, or whatever, on social media, people just going back and forth in arguments or presenting themselves in essays. Literally, when Paul says something, from my perspective anyway, if I don't think the Bible is inspired, he was just one more of those voices. And then through a series of mechanizations, they took some of those and turned them into the Bible. And so seeing them as just one more person, and seeing how maybe Paul as a speaker was potentially trying to manipulate people or coerce people in the same way that other speakers do, and seeing him on the same grounds as just an average preacher or somebody in the middle of a debate, really changed my perspective. And so seeing a lot of these other works, like the ones you brought up, has changed my perspective a lot. So I don't know if that adds anything to what you're asking.
You got a lot of stuff ahead of you, Eric, to go check out. There's a ton of things to discover about that. I'm gonna let you go here, but thank you so much for calling in. Have fun on the journey. There's a lot to discover. There's a lot of stuff out there that you probably are gonna feel like your head is kind of spinning for a little bit. And if you want to like continue to ask questions about this, I think a good place would be to like hop on like our Discord. We have a lot of people having these conversations that you keep talking about it and like talk about other things that you're reading and bounce things off of people. We have a Discord community that's run by fans, and there's always people on there that you can like bounce ideas off of. And as you're looking for resources too, that's a good place to go and ask if anybody like knows where you can find this thing online, or if there's any other places that have talked about it that can maybe help kind of direct you in your discovery. That would be a good place to do that as well. Zod, are you interested in talking about free will?
Sure.
We do have a call coming from Texas again. We had lots of good callers from Texas. I think I should come down there sometime. We've got Andy calling from Texas, and he wants to talk about free will. Oh, give me 1 second here.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hi.
Yes. Yes. Erin Zod, thank you for having me on. And I want to talk about free will. And I believe that we do have free will. And I've listened to the show there at the Community of Austin on their atheist shows. And a lot of people there say that they don't believe that they have free will. And I'm kind of not understanding, how an atheist could, that we don't have free will, it just doesn't make sense to me. So do you want me to explain why I think we have free will first, or what?
Sure. Yeah, let's hear it. Let's hear what's on your mind about that.
Okay. The way I look at it is let's say I want something for lunch. I want pizza or hamburger. I'm thinking I have a choice. I can have pizza or I can have hamburger. It's my choice. Where if it's just predestined for me to have that, it seems like I'm living with the illusion of free will. And I'm thinking, isn't the time to think that it's like, are you living in the Matrix? Well, the time to believe you're living in the Matrix is when there's evidence that you live in the Matrix. Where's the evidence that we don't have free will?
Okay. This is a tricky one. I started questioning whether free will was a real thing when I started seeing these tests that that somebody was doing. I can't remember on what show it was, but they was basically testing our reflexes, how fast we are making our decision. And they were like, somebody was like strapped into like this brain machine thing, and they were asking this person to make a choice. It was just a simple choice, like left or right or whatever. And the machine was actually lighting up as soon as the brain had made its decision, and like it was like 10 out of 10 times the machine beat the person's hand on the choice. Like it seems like pretty clear that like the processes are happening before we're maybe even cognizant of it. And so I think that idea that like the illusion of free will, that's kind of where I'm at with it too. Like I do think that I am pretty much on board with determinism. But we still have this like first person experience, and we live as though we do have choice. That's kind of where I am at this stage. I'm still willing to like listen to other arguments about like compatibilism, and but it seems pretty clear to me that we can actually test this. I don't know. What do you think, Zod?
Okay.
Or
I've heard the same thing where, yeah. Okay, I've had the same test where they hook you up and the computer can tell which choice you'll make before you've made your choice. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a long leap from, the computer can read your brain as you're making a decision, and before I can actually give my decision, the computer, a few microseconds is quicker in determining what I'm going to do. That's a lot different than, let's say we wind the world back to yesterday, and does everything play out exactly the same way? Because free will, I mean, if you go down the hard road of you wind the world back to yesterday and it comes out exactly the same no matter how many times you do it, then yeah, we really are living in a predetermined, predestined world where a computer that's hooked up to my brain waves, yeah, it can figure out before I can make the decision, but can it make that decision, let's say, an hour before you ask me? So think of a card, any card at all in the next hour, and you can hook up my brain right now, but, try to figure it out where maybe I'll make my decision a half hour from now which card I'm going to pick. I think the way that they test that thing, it's basically it's testing your decision, and yes, it can figure out what you're going to do quicker than you can, but it's only because my ability to relay the information is slowed by my body.
Okay. I don't
Does
know.
that make sense?
I think that like it just like is that I'm gonna get my wording wrong here, but it's like I can't will myself to want something other than I already want. I don't know. Maybe you have a better way of explaining it, Zod, but
Yeah, there were a couple things I would say. It's when I think through it intuitively, it feels like there's something deterministic that is going to lead us to make decisions, just because, at least the way I see things intuitively, there might be science to it that I don't understand. It feels like we are a combination of how our bodies are wound up to act and then our environment. So it does feel to me, at least on some intuitive level, just as a philosophical question, that we don't have free will. But I would say a few things. I don't think you can really totally get to the bottom of it, at least in a way that's useful for how we make decisions. And the way I've heard it put, I think it might have been Christopher Hitchens, but I'm not sure, is that we have no choice but to have free will. And that basically sums up my perspective. We basically need to act as if we have free will. So this question doesn't really inform our behavior in any way. So that's really where I end up landing in the end.
That's where I am too. I mean, I can understand from the science point of view of all we have in the universe is mass and energy. And if you put the universe to the exact state it was yesterday and said, okay, start again, if all there is mass and energy and everything's in the same state it was yesterday, would everything play out the same way? And it might. But then again, maybe it doesn't. Maybe there's some type of quantum action going on that maybe that's what allows us to have the free will. But I mean, imagine living in a world where you act as though no one has free will. You never would ask your kid, what do you want for Christmas? You just get whatever you're going to get. If somebody were to kill someone, you would never
totally deny that would be totally like denying our first person experience then, right? Like, I don't think we can get to the bottom of it necessarily either, but we live as though we have choice, because like there is still this experience that we're having. We may not be able to prove that we may not be able to ever like conclusively prove that we don't have free will, but the like part of our consciousness is the experience of having choice. And I don't it's one of those philosophical questions that I think there are some arguments on both sides that I find interesting, but like we can't step back in history and necessarily know whether things would happen exactly again how it is, but we might as well live as though we have choice. Go ahead.
You're thinking the same way I am now. You're doing the same thing I am. I mean, basically, yes, I can understand the science of maybe we don't have free will. But by the same token, we have to live as though we do and everyone else does, because that's the only way our life makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, to go through life and just tell everything's happening, it happens, I'm just going to go along because why make a choice? Because everything's just going to happen. It's just a ridiculous way to live.
Yeah, so, I mean, it does cause some existential kind of dread when you start thinking about it, but I think that there is some level of compatibility, like going forward, like that you know, within that first person experience, like you are going to make a choice and then you're going to be happy with that, where that choice goes, because you had the experience of making that choice. And like granting other people that same experience that they are having in a human experience where they are feeling that idea of choice. So I don't think there's much more we can do about it other than that. And I think that as far as when it comes down to, because I know that some of the arguments go to like, well, then how do we construct our society? And I think then you have to talk about like, well, like how can you punish somebody if they've made a decision and they don't have free will? But then you still have to function as a society and you have to make sure that people are safe. So like, even though somebody is a murderer, and we can look in their, you know, we can see them as somebody who has had some part of their fate has been determined because of their upbringing. But the reality of how we actually live is that we need to make sure that they can't harm other people. So we still have to live within that idea, you know? Does that make sense to you?
I agree completely. That does make sense. But why wouldn't the normal position be then that we have free will until we can prove that there isn't free will? Why wouldn't that be the default state of it appears we have it until someone can say that definitively that we don't.
What do you mean by the default state? Like, I don't think that is something that is. I don't think there's a default state for almost anything. I think that people argue about it all the time.
Yeah, but the thing is, everyone I've ever met acts as though they have free will and everyone else does. They ask, "Hey, what do you want for lunch? Hey, what do you want for Christmas? You know, why do you like this person, that person? What do you I mean?" They ask as though we have free will to choose. You want to be a Democrat or Republican? We ask it, you know, as though everyone has a choice. Since everyone I've ever met acts that way, shouldn't everyone by default say, "I think we have free will, but we may not have it, and here's some reasons why we may not have it, but we can't definitively prove that that's true"?
I think it is the default as far as how we view the world in terms of how we should act. Like, basically what you're saying to me serves as having free will being at least the functional default of how we see things. I think beyond that, it's just philosophical questions. And I think starting conversation with the assumption or maybe the major possibility that we don't have free will for some reason helps us think through how decisions are made or how things work. But functionally, yeah, we all behave as if we have free will, and I think we're going to, which is why I'm not terribly interested in delving too far into the bottom of this question or getting too hung up on it, because like you said, it doesn't impact the way we live. The only big exception I would take is when people try to say that God's existence makes free will more possible or something like that. When it starts becoming used as an apologetic, then I'm going to have a bit of an issue with it.
And I can understand where someone basically definitively says that we have free will for a fact. Well, we can't prove that we have free will. We can't prove it one way or the other. I mean, it appears that we do, but unless we could like rewind the world back to yesterday and run it over again, do something different, that would prove we have free will. But since we can't do that, I don't know how you would ever prove definitively that we do have it or not.
Yeah, I'm kind of on board with you, Zod, that like there's only so much that we can like we're maybe not get into the bottom of it, but I think it's important that we aren't using the idea of our free will experience to cause harm or abuse to other people, because I think that's one of the most common ways that it is used. That like, you know, being certain ways is a choice, and like it gets loosely used to blame people for a lot of different things. So I don't know. I'm gonna let you go now, Andy, but thank you so much for calling in. I don't know. We're just gonna keep living like we have the illusion of free will, even though it seems like maybe we don't. Before we get to our next call, if we were going to take, I think someone's on the line here that we may or may not want to talk to, but before we go into that, I think we're going to take a little break here and take a promo or show our promo for the other shows. If you didn't know, Truth Wanted is part of the ACA, and they have a lot of other programs. And so we're going to just do a quick promo for those now.
And he goes on to say things like they're having drag queens come in and read to children.
Man, I wish that drag queens were getting invited to read to kids in schools.
There was one guy that said a female Bigfoot drug him up from the creek and had intercourse with him. And of course, my question is, how was it?
Please, this isn't Thursday.
Dave Chappelle did a bit talking about how after 9/11, he turned on the news and there was a reporter that was like, we're going to go right now to talk to Ja Rule about his thoughts on this tragedy. And Chappelle's like, no one gives a what Ja Rule thinks at a time like this.
This tin of beans is the almighty deity, and we need to worship this tin of beans because it will bring us prosperity and it will make us all fertile.
I do not care what your religion is. I do not care if you believe in a god. I do not care if you like green eggs and ham.
Oh my God. That's so funny. So if you want to check out some of the other shows that we have on the ACA, you can find them all in one spot. You can go to tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. We have all the other programs, and I'm actually going to be coming up on the nonprofits this next Wednesday. If you didn't know, the nonprofit is our flagship series here on the ACA. And we've got secular sexuality and the atheist experience and all of those other favorites if you want to check them out there. And let's just check in with our callers here. Do you want to talk to Otangelo? I'm not sure if you know about him. I think he's been a regular call-in on most of our shows, but it seems to be something that if you've seen him call in once, you've probably seen him call in on most of the shows. But I think he does have a slightly different question for us.
Yeah, let's go ahead and hear it out.
Okay, so here we go. Otangelo, hi. You're on with Erin and Zod, and you have a question about would the host become believers and become Christian if God was proven to exist?
Right. Hello, Zod. Hi, Erin.
Hi.
Thanks for taking my call. Yes, that's.
We're going to give you 10 minutes.
Correct.
So would we become believers if it was proven that God existed? Is that your question?
Yes, correct. And I'm not talking just a general God, but in special Christ, the God of the Bible.
So if it was proven, is that what you said? If it was proven that the Christian God was real, would we become Christian?
Yes, correct.
So you're basically like, if it was proven to be true, would you accept the truth, or would you become an adherent to Christian doctrine and worship that God in such a way that was proven to be necessary?
Yes, I would say that these would be two very different and distinct positions that you could take. You could acknowledge God's or Christ's existence, but still choose to live your life on your own as if he wouldn't exist. And on the other hand, you would have the choice actually to surrender to him and receive him as Lord and Savior and follow him.
Okay, so my answer to this is pretty straightforward. I think I'm pretty risk averse. So if the God that has a hell was real and it was proven to me, I'd probably become a Christian again. But I wouldn't be happy about it because I'd be doing it to avoid the pain. But I don't think that that's a good way to try to get somebody to choose you by threatening them. I think that's a little bit of a different answer. But I'm trying to be honest with the fact that I don't want to burn forever. But I think that there are so many different iterations of the Christian God that it would be pretty tricky to prove to me that the Christian God that believes in this exact type of hell and heaven, and I'd also, you'd also have to maybe demonstrate the means of salvation, and there's a lot more to it than just like, if it's real, would you follow it? My instinct is that I would probably do whatever I needed to do to get hurt, but I don't know. It sounds like a pretty shitty situation.
Yeah, but I think you gave a significant answer here, Erin, because I think this is a good reason why God actually isn't proving himself to the world, because then many would think exactly as you answered now. They would see themselves count against their will. They would accept him just out of fear to go to hell. And that wouldn't permit a relationship of love and trust. No. And I think that would be. I think
we're missing where the disconnect is in this being a relationship of love instead of fear. Mm-hmm. I think it's pretty evident that where this becomes a relationship of fear is where, theoretically, assuming God exists, he presents you with a proposition where you have to accept him based on fear. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is, the fact that he's presenting this in terms of a threat of hell is not the problem. The problem is that if he informed you of your choice, then you would possibly accept him on, I don't know, that you would accept him for bad reasons. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it would basically be a bad reason, because what
So-
God aims is to have a loving relationship with us, based on his goodness, and not just.
So are you accusing God of giving us bad reasons to love him to begin with? Because it sounds like you're just basically saying, if we were given an informed choice, we would react based on the options God gave us, and that would be a problem to you. So it sounds like you're accusing God of giving us bad reasons to accept him.
Now, what I am saying is that if God would reveal himself to us in a way that there would be no doubt anymore in regards of his existence, and everything else would be the same, that means we would know that we would have to choose between going to heaven or to hell, and we would simply choose him because we wouldn't want to go to hell. That wouldn't be a good reason, which God actually wants. He wants to have a loving relationship with us, and not just a relationship.
I'm going to mute you for a second. What evidence do you have that God wants a relationship with us, or what evidence do you have that God is real? Because this is an interesting hypothetical that gets asked of atheists a lot. But I mean, hypotheticals are one thing, but like, what are you bringing to the table here besides just a hypothetical?
Yes, that is not actually the reason why I called in. I mean, I can come up with the Bible, with evidence in the natural world, which points to a designer and things like that.
Okay,
But
but
then,
one,
of course, you can say just I don't believe it, and that would go the common route of the usual conversations debating of God's existence. But that wasn't actually the point why I called in.
okay, so what is the point of you calling today?
Well, the point is, I had recently actually a conversation with an atheist, and he said, well, I met you on YouTube over a year ago, and I've listened to many of your streams and arguments and so forth, and I think that no atheist has actually ever provided or presented counter arguments to refute what you say. But this guy, nonetheless, he continues an atheist. So basically, he acknowledged that theism is the better worldview compared to naturalism or to strong atheism, but nonetheless, he keeps being an atheist. So I conclude by.
Sorry. Are you saying that? I'm going to mute you again. So are you saying like that this atheist friend of yours is admitting to being a dishonest non-believer? Would that be the right way to say it?
You could maybe describe it like that. But what I want to say by this is that, in my understanding, that acknowledging or following God or the God of the Bible isn't just something which depends on evidence. It is also something which has to do with will, with what we actually want. And I mean, I have heard, for example, Matt Dillahunty many times saying, well, even if the God of the Bible would be proven to exist, I wouldn't follow him. I wouldn't acknowledge him or worship.
So I'm extremely uninterested in what other people have said about this question. If you want me to answer your original question, I can. I think we pretty much came upon a very poor reason for God not revealing himself to us, and one that becomes self-defeating and does pretty evidently show that God is it basically is saying that God's presenting us with a dilemma, and that dilemma is a bad reason for making a choice, therefore God hides from us. And that just feels like a long path toward explaining why God's not an evident part of reality, which is something I would expect religions to do, because they have to explain why their proposition is not part of evident reality. As far as your original question, would I believe in God if he were proven? obviously I would believe that in the existence of whatever I saw. And then second, would I align myself with it or accept that being? I think there are a few things that we need to acknowledge about this whole question. First, it's a little presumptuous to ask because it's putting the cart before the horse. I've noticed apologists or certain types of Christians have a tendency, I don't know where it comes from, if it's from some form of frustration over people not accepting their belief or just seeing their belief as being more pivotal in everybody's life than it really is, of asking people these hypothetical questions about what we would do if it were proven. And I just don't see the fruitfulness in asking that question. But if it were posed to me, my take on it would be that it's a more complex proposition than, yes, I would believe it and agree with it. Number one, for the reasons Erin said, we would have to understand the morality behind aligning ourselves with this God. But beyond that, it's not just a package deal. I think if God would just be a being presenting itself to me, and it would reveal itself to me in layers. I would have to come to individually understand parts about this being, including what its physical attributes were, what its nature was, what it wanted from me. And it wouldn't just be any kind of lump, blah, this is the Christian God. I would have to learn its personality firsthand as I interacted with it. If I found that it started to align with the Bible, then yeah, that would start to direct me toward thinking it was the God described in the Bible. But that would be a process. And like Erin said, also, I believe there are different versions of the Christian God. There are different ways that different Christians see God. And so I would need to, before I could even answer this as a hypothetical, I would need to see which version of that was even presented to me. So really, this is just a big, long process of getting to know what would basically be an extremely intelligent and extremely powerful alien being and decide how I'm going to react to it. And so there's a ton to that. The best way I could put it to you, to describe my reaction, would be to present you with an alternative scenario. If something outside your religion started to present itself to you, what thought process would you go through before you started believing it was true, then knowing what you believed about it and how much you wanted to react to it? I think you would probably understand that was a very complex process that would not lead you to jump to any real quick conclusions, and that you probably could not answer hypothetically. And so I think you need to grant that to people who don't believe in your specific religion and not expect them to come to quick, easy, hypothetical answers, accepting a lot of things that you've accepted as packaged dogma, because that doesn't automatically come along with belief in a deity in general, or even belief in a specific kind of Christian God or whatever. I don't know if that clarifies anything, but I think there is a lot of, not necessarily intentional, but a lot of presumption behind this question that puts a burden on us to accept a shift in our thinking without evidence that you wouldn't necessarily, I don't think, take with any other being other than the God that you've already accepted based on a body of doctrine. So that's my reaction to the question.
I was clear in my initial question when I said I am talking here about the Christian God which revealed himself in the Bible. So by reading the Bible, and he would appear to you and say, I am the God which revealed himself in the Gospels, which is described there with that character and with these attributes described there. So that would be a very specific characterization. What I believe is that God, he reveals himself sufficiently to those that want to believe, and he hides himself sufficiently to those which want to live autonomously to him. And that permits those which do not want to have him to have their life the way they want it, and those that actually want to seek and find him.
Okay, so I feel like all around, like you're just your presupposition going into this is that we've all been given the correct amount of evidence. So if we weren't accepting it, it's because of some sort of, heart issue, or however you would put that. So, I mean, I think that if you're not willing to grant that we are being honest in our responses and in our intellectual, endeavors on trying to figure out what is true in the world, there's not much more to talk about if you can't grant us. That's a pretty small thing to grant somebody, is that they're being honest with you.
And I kind of feel sorry for anybody who is dealing with a proposition that's so lacking in evidence that they need to rely on anything that falls even close to, I can't bend this spoon right now because the people in the room are giving negative energy. By the time you're blaming somebody's attitude on the fact that a phenomena is not manifesting itself, you're kind of in bad company as far as what your proposition sounds like. And it, from the outside, it really reeks of obvious excuse making. And you're building I don't think you're doing this intentionally. I've been there. I get a lot of the pressures that go into making your mind go in these directions. So I'm not trying to presume what you're doing or why, but functionally, what your explanation does is takes a worldwide reaction to an unproven phenomena that spreads based on basically natural means of indoctrination or evangelism or whatever. Some people accept it and some people don't. You're taking that and overlaying an explanation on it. There's no reason for us to think that's true. So the real problem becomes for us, we're being approached as if we have disingenuous intentions. Other people are not necessarily going to appreciate that. But for your side, the challenge for you is that does not give you anything to engage other people with. When an argument leaves you no options other than to preach at somebody or storm off angry, or just get mired down in some kind of totally unprovable conversation where you're just representing their intentions to them, you're not giving yourself a lot of room for conversation with outsiders, and you're not opening doors that's going to lead to people believing you.
I have one more question for you, Otangelo, just along this. I would like you to answer that. Do you think that we are honest? Otangelo?
Is the way that you interpreted it. I am just talking based on
I'd like you to
that I had with this atheist.
Do you think that Zod here and I are being honest when we give our answers, or just in general, do you think that we're honest? Yes or no? I think we have our answer. All right.
Yes, the call was interrupted, so I didn't.
Okay.
Hear
Okay. Did you hear my question? I would just like a yes or no answer, please. Do you think that we're being honest?
No, I didn't hear you. Yes,
okay.
No, I didn't hear your question.
This is the very last time I'm going to ask, and then I'm gonna let you go today. Do you think that we are honest? That we're being honest?
Well, I cannot evaluate that because I don't know up to what point you have done your epistemological investigation and on what grounds that you are having the position that you have and your conclusion. So since I do not have that information, I cannot give you an honest answer on that. I would have to have a longer conversation.
Okay, so I'm going to let you go today. My advice to you, Otangelo, is just if you're going to have these conversations with atheists, which I know you do a lot, I've seen your conversations. I think that you're going to get further in the conversation and get more out of the conversation if you extend that. What is the charitability, like the idea of being charitable and listening to your interlocutor and giving them the benefit of the doubt that we are at least trying to be honest with it, because I don't think you're going to get anywhere when you have that presupposition that like Zod had said this already, that like you're basically it's not worth talking to somebody if they're not going to believe what you say. So that's it. We tried. Thanks for calling. It's frustrating.
I don't know that what he says amounts to dishonesty, but it's bad intentions. We would not accept God even if he were revealed to be true. There really is absolutely no reason that a God would need to not clearly manifest to everybody just for that reason. Like, I don't know, in a natural world, some people are going to accept an unproven proposition and some are not. And so when you just say that there's some reason where God reveals himself to these people, therefore they have good reason to believe in him, but that revelation isn't something you can show anybody, and all the people with negative Nelly attitudes aren't going to have it revealed to them, you're basically admitting you have nothing to work with. That's the way I look at it. And yeah, there's so much back and forth in all these answers, and they get presented in so many words or these questions that it just, you end up swimming. And like you said, you had to keep muting him to bring the conversation back onto task. Otherwise, there is no yes or no answer. There's only essay answers that go in various directions.
Yeah.
And we keep getting different answers that generally contradict themselves depending on which part of the conversation is being addressed. And so on one hand, he'll say that God doesn't reveal himself for one reason. On another case, it's for another reason. He will say that God wants a loving relationship. I don't know.
I was gonna, so a couple of things that I've heard him talk a lot before, and I knew he was gonna, I kind of knew where he was coming at from that. So like I tried to answer as honestly as I could, and it did seem like if you give an answer, then there's gonna constantly, the goalpost gets moved, and like it just kind of can go around in a circle forever and ever. But oh shoot, I just lost my train of thought. I did want to talk to him, but that was like 17 minutes or something, and I don't think we got very many answers out of him. So I don't know.
All you can do, I think, is glean something from the conversation that is illustrative for the people listening. And as long as you can do that, hopefully it helps any of you watching in conversation. But this would have done nothing but led us further in circles than it already did.
Yeah, it's basically just choosing like when to call it quits. We've got another call on the line. We've got Sandra calling in from Ohio. She says, "My evil boss wants me to stay in a haunted hotel." Oh, I personally would love that. I think it'd be.
Hi, how you doing?
Super good time.
Hello.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi. Yeah. Hi. Thank you for taking my call. As Erin just said, I have a work trip coming up, and my boss, we're holding an event in a hotel that is rumored to be haunted, and she thinks it would just be really convenient for me to just stay right there in that hotel. And I don't really believe in ghosts, but the idea just makes me feel a little uneasy. Like somebody reported that a ghost crawled into bed with her and had sex with her. I don't want that to happen. And not that I think it's likely, but it just makes me I feel a little uneasy. Help me out here. What do you think?
Oh my gosh. Somebody had a ghost. Okay. I don't know. I think maybe bring a flashlight, what kind of like safety measures do you have in your state? I'm not sure. I think I would love to go into a hotel that was like reported to be haunted. I think I would like set up a lot of like tests and like try to catch something like that. I don't really get freaked out by that stuff anymore. I used to. I genuinely was afraid of the dark until I was like 30, because I had this like idea that there was like actual ghosts and demons and things in the world. But I don't get afraid of that stuff very much anymore. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. That sounds like a really crazy situation.
Yeah, and it's not like I actively think like ghosts definitely exist, but just the idea, like I have like a recurring nightmare of like being watched while I'm sleeping, and the idea of a haunted hotel just makes me feel a little uneasy. And did you say I could bring a flashlight as a safety measure?
Yeah, I think so.
Really? Okay.
If it's not there during the light, I don't see any real reason why it's going to be there when the lights go off. So I think most people are get afraid when it gets dark out. I don't know. That's kind of I think that's part of our way we've evolved too. So yeah, flashlight, you can use it as a weapon and to just make sure the light stays on.
Yeah, I'll say this as somebody who I have to admit sometimes can get a little afraid of the dark. It's not nearly as bad as when I was younger, but I can feel spooked in a moment and just want to flip on a light or run out of the room or whatever. It's a totally irrational impulse, in my opinion, but it's still there. I can't make it go away. So I guess my question would be, it's kind of like with Otangelo. He came up with explanations for a natural phenomena that he came up with an explanation that fits what you'd expect to see in a natural world and try to make something supernatural out of it, right? So what I suspect is what I have to suspect is happening as somebody who can get freaked out by the dark sometimes. If something is there when the lights are off, but they go away when the lights are on, and it aligns with our general feeling of being spooked by a creepy environment, then it's probably just you being spooked by a creepy environment. So from my perspective, I don't mean to downplay any feelings you're having about it or whatever. My approach personally would just do whatever I needed to do to not be freaked out by that environment and kind of try to recognize what my feelings most likely are. That would be my personal approach.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to having feeling uneasy in the dark. That's probably where my feelings come from. And like I said, I don't really think ghosts are real or anything, but I was just reading some of the, I don't know, myths, legends of this hotel, and yeah, they're just very scary. And
one coping mechanism you might want to start with is reading less of that if it freaks you out. Yeah. I'm not trying to be snarky. That's just a suggestion. If that gets you riled up.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's probably a good idea.
I think you're going to be okay. I think, bring a few things, maybe set up a test if you're feeling brave, and maybe call us back after and tell us if anything happened and how it went for you.
Okay, I think I could probably do that if I live to tell the tale.
Okay, thanks for calling in. Talk to you next time.
Thanks.
That actually, as much as that can feel like kind of like a silly topic, I'm being totally serious. That I was really afraid of the dark, and I would be afraid to walk around corners and things well into my adulthood, well into being a parent myself. And I actually I went to a hotel a couple of years ago in Canada here that was supposedly haunted, and I think I was kind of early in my deconstruction at that point, and I distinctly remember a lot of people around me were really freaking out over things, and really for the first time in my life, kind of questioning, is there any reason to be afraid of these stories? They're really fantastical stories about all the people who died in the hotel, and people who had come back and visited the patrons that were there. And I think also looking into the origins of where ghosts, the ghost stories come from, what kind of tricks our brains play on us, and our entity detection systems in our brain. There's a lot of good reasons why we get freaked out in the dark, or why we get freaked out when something rustles to our left or something like that. Understanding how the brain works is a really good way to take the superstition out of it. And even though I still do get startled, I can get spooked. I can watch a show and something can jump out and scare me, but it doesn't keep me up at night anymore. I don't have nightmares anymore. So I don't know. But that was all very, very real to me when I was a Christian. And I think it's maybe because of the flavor of Christianity, or sorry, I shouldn't say flavor, part of the denomination that I was in. We really did believe in things that went bump in the night. And it was kind of a scary way to live. I don't know.
Yeah, at a cabin that my family has, when I was younger, I used to sometimes get sleep paralysis and various feelings that went with that. And I would get it there pretty bad because I'd have irregular sleep. And so once we'd found a beer bottle in the cabin, and once I experienced sleep paralysis, and because of the upbringing and the way I'd been taught to understand weird or creepy experiences, I thought that there was a demon in the cabin and that it had been brought there by somebody drinking. And
Oh, yeah,
so
I
yeah,
can see how you could get there. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I don't think I took that really seriously, even through most of my Christian life, but I do have that experience. I'm not much into horror movies, but if I watch something, not like people running around slashing or whatever, if I watch something weird like The Sixth Sense or something like that, I'll feel weird in the dark afterwards. I know it's totally irrational, and I don't think it's as bad now as even it was earlier in my adulthood, but that feeling's there, and you just have to process what it is and recognize that it's very unlikely that a ghost or a demon is going to get you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I totally relate to that. Like I used to get sleep paralysis as well, and I think that's like when people tell me their stories of these encounters that they have, like I really feel for them because I remember being genuinely scared out of my mind at certain times growing up, and even like I don't know, the last time that I thought I saw something was probably like 5 years ago, and like it really bothered me for like months and months, and I would have nightmares about it. Totally had the sleep paralysis feeling where there's like something on your chest. And I know so many different people who had different stories of, I mean, ghosts are a big one. Demons are even bigger from where I grew up. But yeah, I don't know. There's nothing there. I don't think there's any way to prove that I mean, there's no reason to be afraid of the dark. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And if you do have a cool story, like call in and tell us about it, because we want to know like what is making people still believe that there are things that go bump in the night. So I think that's pretty much wraps up our calls for this evening. Zod, thank you so much for coming on and talking with everybody with me. I loved having you on as a guest. Can you let everybody know, like if they for some reason haven't heard of you or haven't watched your channel, can you let everybody know where to find you?
Yeah, mainly YouTube. That's my main thing. So just search for Prophet of Zod. The nice thing about my name is it's not going to bring up anything other than me. So YouTube and Twitter are the main areas I'm active, and YouTube's the main place to find my content. So I'm different on my channel because I'm highly scripted. But if anything I've said makes you interested in hearing more about me, go check it out, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely go check out his channel. It's really you put a lot of care and thought into everything that you put on your channel. Very well thought out. If you're interested in contacting us or like continuing the conversation further, you can always email us at truth@atheist-community.org. You can get a hold of us through the Facebook or the Discord. Both of those are run by our fans. And if you like what we do here, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/truthwanted, or you can become a member here on YouTube. And I think it's as little as $1 a month, and then you get to get past the delay in the chat, and you get to use the little emojis of Dan's face there. And I think last but not least, let's take a look at our crew. I was mentioning earlier how much our crew does. We could not do any of this without them. They work super, super hard to make this show happen. So thank you guys. Thanks everybody. And Zod, do you have any last words before we sign off here?
Nope. Just thanks for having me, and thanks to the crew and everybody else who made this possible. It's a lot of fun to do these. So yeah, I appreciate the chance.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming again. And remember, everybody, always keep wanting the truth.
Watch The Non-Prophets and join the hosts in the live chat, Sundays at 3 p.m. Central between the Atheist Experience and Talk Heathen. Visit tiny.cc/YTNP.